enough differences here. Do they still feel like siblings? All right, you're gonna have to pardon just a little bit of rambling in this video because I've got a lot of ground to cover on two different phones and I got a lot of thoughts up in my brain. It's my first time rocking a Vivo and double trouble. So this is an interesting split. Not only two flavors of X70, it's also my first hands-on with a Snapdragon 888 Plus and my first time using a Dimensity 1200. So that's a lot of firsts for one video. The general trend from an Apple or a Samsung, same name of a phone usually means the same SoC. All Galaxy S21s have a Snapdragon 888. For the X60 Pro and Pro Plus, Vivo used different chips, but they were both made by Qualcomm. This is something even a little more different, and that's fun to dig into because I'm not hip to Vivo release schedules. The X60 was out in January. If you've caught any of my reviews or other videos, you'd know I'm a really big fan of specialization, and I love it when a manufacturer makes some bold claims about specific uses for specific customers, especially on premium priced devices. I don't front this mid-ranger or flagship conversation in my videos. I want to see phones for creators, phones for gamers, for productivity, etc., etc. Vivo's claims for the X70s are right up my alley. Now, I think tech reviewers lean too heavy on camera conversations for a lot of phones, but it's warranted here. From the not subtle Zeiss branding to the whole collection of unique photo and video features, there's a clear focus on content creation. Up front, the second anyone says, but what about average consumers? They've completely missed the point. I'm test driving this diesel truck, but what about all the people shopping fuel-efficient mid-sized sedans? But it really is impossible not to fixate on these cameras. And in many ways, these phones feel like spiritual successors to phones like the LG Wing and LG V60. And we've seen a few of these camera tricks on other phones, but the idea is to find differentiators and push the content creation idea a step farther than the competition. Large sensors, mainstream photography company partnership, advanced modes in operation, and action camera style stabilization. These are phones and pocket computers, so they need to cover all the bases. But there's also an obvious focus on what they should excel at. Not every phone should have the same pros and cons. I started off talking about the different chips used in these two, and you can get the full specs rundown on GSM Arena, so you don't need me to sit here and read the specs at you, right? And we can also take it for granted that these were designed to be used by evolved primates with opposable thumbs, so feeling nice in the hand is a given. And I'm glad we got that out of the way. I should highlight one design accent on the Pro Plus though. This entire panel drawing attention to the camera module. It should never escape anyone's attention what this phone is all about. The Pro is a fair bit more discreet. Now here's my gripe with the Vivo presentation though. The case this phone comes with has a similar panel, but it's not reflective. The panel on the phone itself is actually kind of rad to use as a mirror for a rear camera selfie, but there's no way I'm taking either of these phones out without a case. So I'd highly recommend a clear bumper to get your mirror back. I should tangent here for just a second, real quick. I really appreciate a nice unboxing experience. In a world of companies taking the chargers out of the box, it's refreshing to have a premium box for a premium phone. Excellent presentation, fast chargers, cases, and not only headphone dongles, but also a decent pair of earbuds. Now, you'll probably replace some of this gear, like may be the case, but I still feel there's value in spending a lot of money on a phone and having it arrive completely ready to use with nice accessories. You can miss me with the environmental arguments, because if I buy another phone and get a faster charger, a case, and some earbuds, that's gonna arrive with a lot more packaging and shipping waste. But I digress. Back to the phones. These two are launching in the fall of 2021, and they're about where we would expect powerful premium phones to land. I'll have a write-up on my blog, SomeGadgetGuy.com, breaking down some of my performance testing. But the early results are encouraging for embargo pre-release software. Each phone could certainly do with a bit more software polish, but these early experiences are positive. What I want to drill down on for just a second, these two phones are different tiers of device. Now, I don't like making every video an implied comparison, but it's the only way to describe what I see here. The X70 Pro lands somewhere just ahead of Snapdragon 855 powered phones and just slightly behind phones using Qualcomm's 865. I think this is a sweet spot for phone hardware. There's very little software that truly taxes an SoC like the 855 or this Dimensity 1200. Gaming is one area where we might notice some performance differences. Playing the most graphics-intense titles at the top quality settings, I'd be more concerned if this were a gaming-focused device. But it's perfectly capable of playing some demanding games at very good frame rates. Instead, there is a counterpoint argument about having a phone built using a slightly older CPU arrangement, that while it can't compete at the absolute peak performance, it can offer better consistency. Every manufacturer has had to find some trick to keep the 888 in check, and this Vivo is no exception with the Pro Plus. This phone doesn't win any of my super challenging performance tests, but it accomplishes tasks running cooler than phones like my Mi 11i. I'd say since 2018, maybe 2017, consumers have been grossly overbuying compute power that they are not using. At the core camera tasks that these phones are built around, the one main advantage for the Pro Plus might be editing and rendering faster in some apps. Power Director is making better use of the 888, but KineMaster is almost in margin of error territory, completing the same project on both phones. And in a simple single video edit, the Pro can sometimes outpace the Pro Plus. I've said it before, I'll probably say it again. Reviewers who are harping on having the latest and greatest SoC should be able to demonstrate where those performance differences matter. Consumers do not work in Geekbench. They don't get their work done in Antutu. My snarkiness notwithstanding, compute power will matter in specific apps, especially for content creation. But one synthetic benchmark score will never predict which phone will perform better in real-world conditions. Where Vivo should be praised, they've largely arrived at a very similar feel for two phones running such different internals. And that goes double for the camera hardware. Different main sensors, different solutions to arrive at gimbal stabilization. The Pro Plus includes a dedicated co-processor for some of the more advanced processing available, but there's still an identifiable vibe to how these phones shoot. The last time I could compare two different processors from the same manufacturer on similar phones, we were looking at two flavors of LG Velvet, and it was very easy to demonstrate differences in photo processing. MediaTek and Qualcomm have different image processing hardware, yet comparing the output on these two, Vivo is closing the gap surprisingly well, even down to some obnoxious pixel peeping. Now, to that point, the Pro might be a bit easier to get up to speed. I think it's a little clearer when you're using features like the gimbal. And the Pro Plus tacks on more alternative modes, like Zeiss color processing, which those modes run separate from the normal HDR settings. The Pro Plus now takes my top spot for steepest smartphone camera learning curve. But before techies start whining about average consumers, I need people to understand that I think this is a good problem to have. There's a lot you can do here, and it takes time to properly familiarize yourself with all the ins and outs of what the camera can do. Where would you want to use a gimbal mode? How to build an expectation on HDR output? When might you want to use the Zeiss color? Is there an advantage to shooting RAW versus super RAW? Auto video or pro video? You can't decipher all that by shooting a couple test photos in auto mode a week before the phone launches to the public. There's absolutely a market for the easiest point-and-shoot solution for the masses. I have a video breaking down why I like the Pixel camera app so much, but on the enormous spectrum of Pixel camera to Vivo camera, there's no one bestest way to camera. Both are excellent, but they're excellent for different consumers. It's just plain bad tech reviewing to ignore the community of people who might appreciate more exacting controls or who might want more room to grow before they need to invest in third-party apps. There's a lot you can learn about photography and a lot you can accomplish before you max this phone out and need to turn to standalone camera gear. So the Pro and Pro Plus names are fitting. The Pro accomplishes the core idea of what a content creation phone should deliver, and the Plus add some functionality on top of that. I've had a decent amount of time with both, and I'll be wrapping up a full camera deep dive soon on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. As it stands today, in a general kind of phone ranking, I think Sony still feels like the most traditional camera-like experience, but mixing the fun stuff and the pro stuff, Vivo is now about as close as I think we might get to a replacement for my precious LG phones. And if you've ever watched any of my videos before, you would understand how high that praise might be. Starting to land this plane, let's start wrapping this up. I'm reluctant to call this video a review because it's so early for the software. It's an embargo timeframe where consumers have not been able to buy these yet, and I'm still familiarizing myself with what makes Vivo different from other related BBK gadgets. Looking at things like software, I've encountered a few little UI bumps that are hard to showcase on camera. Like there's a semi-stutter in my app drawer when adaptive frame rate is enabled. Occasionally, the right side of the camera viewfinder will distort, but thankfully that hasn't affected any of my footage. Every phone launches with some tweaks needed, so I'm not inclined to rate these issues too severely just yet. But a major part of a review is speaking to things like support, which I can't do at the moment, having a lot less experience with this brand. For a part of this early conversation, I have to rely on a little more comparing against a phone I am better familiar with. That was a really awkward way to say that. I've enjoyed the recent turn from OnePlus over these last couple of years, especially the 8 Pro to the OnePlus 9s. There's been a lot of chatter online about the Oppoification of OnePlus and how those two companies will essentially be merging. When Vivo reached out about sending these my way to take them for a test drive, I had an expectation that because Vivo is also a subsidiary of BBK Electronics, that these X70s would also feel very similar to their OnePlus cousins. And they kinda don't. It's difficult to perfectly quantify, but the Vivos have arrived as better performers in a number of subtle ways, like network utilization. My OnePlus 9s generally do not like my Wi-Fi 6 router. The Vivos can nearly triple throughput when they're talking to my NOS. The OnePlus video quality is excellent, but the Vivos deliver significantly more camera functionality and without hard time limits on UHD video recording. OnePlus as a label has shifted to something much more broadly mainstream. The X line from Vivo feels like it's more targeted at a specific demographic. There's something unique here, and it's fun to see that where I was expecting more of a label swap. This region gets a OnePlus box, this region gets a Vivo box, but the phones feel pretty much the same, and that hasn't happened. I'll be digging a bit more into each phone, camera review, audio review. I've got a gimbal video almost ready to go. It's early impressions still, but my one largest fear has mostly been calmed, that we'd see a larger disparity between Qualcomm and MediaTek flavors of this concept. So stay tuned. We'll have a bit more to chat about as we wrap up the year, and I'm feeling like there might need to be a few more comparisons than what I usually shoot on this channel. It should be fun. I'll of course leave some links down below this video where you can find more information on Vivo and their X70 line of phones. Maybe shop these puppies online, especially if you're in international markets. You have easier access to these rad little camera phones. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. Supporting your favorite content creators has never been more critical, so I greatly appreciate those of you who are checking out the links down below. Maybe you're shopping a little merch. That kind of stuff really does help keep production rolling on this channel. There's a full list of all my affiliates and partnerships on SomeGadgetGuy.com, or you might consider, just maybe, joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This is basically a list of the coolest tech pals on the planet, so I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch. and the Facebooks and the Instagrams. And I will catch you all on the next video.